Well, good afternoon. Welcome to Open Classroom. I'm Janet Gillow, the Director of Professional Development for the Brown School here at Washington University in St. Louis. We are so happy to have you here as part of today's program. Throughout this Zoom webinar, people joining us on this platform, we can't see or hear you. Cameras are disabled, microphones are muted, but the chat feature is enabled, and many of you have already said hello. We love that, and please keep it going. We intend for this to be as interactive a presentation as possible. I want to welcome anybody who's joining the YouTube feed. Some of the participation you may be able to do when it's housed in other media, but of course, the chat here on Zoom, sorry about that, but we won't be able to loop you into it. I want to thank and acknowledge my friend and co-hostess with the mostest, Cynthia Williams. I'm here to help moderate the chat and generally make sure the program rolls well for us today. Before we get started, just going to share a couple of things that we have coming up, the next two programs on Open Classroom. So this Thursday is a special event for us. September 2nd, we're having our convocation. That's the official academic start of the year for the Brown School. And our own Dr. Leopoldo Cabaza is delivering a talk called A Call to Action, addressing racial and ethnic health inequities in people with serious mental illness. So this is our special event, but the digital platform lets us open it up to absolutely everyone. So if you're interested in celebrating the start of the school year and hearing some top-notch, cutting-edge scholarship, please come back and join us for that. And then possibly of interest to some of the same audience, next Tuesday, a week from today on September 7th, Associate Professor of the Practice Ryan Lindsay is going to be delivering a talk on school-based suicide prevention strategies. Again, those are free, open to everybody, and they're available for registration along with about, seriously, 20 other things that we have going on our website. I will throw a link in the chat. But now, it's my great pleasure to bring back today's speaker for an encore talk. Stephanie Krauss is an alumna of our MSW program. She is a mom with background in education and social work, and she works at the intersection of education, human services, and workforce development. Stephanie focuses on what young people and their families need to survive and thrive now and in the future. She does this as a consultant, as an advisor, and this year as author of Making It What Today's Kids Need for Tomorrow's World. So this is an important topic anyway, but with the pandemic, we've seen the challenges our young people face kicked up, sometimes more than a few notches. So here to talk to us about science and strategies to help tweens and teens in pandemic recovery and beyond, please welcome the completely awesome Stephanie Krauss.
Janet, thank you so much. And for those of you who are on and listening, I have to confess why this is an encore talk. Hopefully my friends Cynthia and Janet would have had me back anyway, but I feel like it's an incredible, metaphor for the last 18 months. So the last time I did an open classroom, I had gone on my very first vacation since the pandemic had started. And this was like the one thing I was going to do for work. And I had gotten everything set up. And we had gotten started, and all of a sudden I got an emergency notification about my children, and my husband was on, my parents were watching my kids. My husband had actually come onto the webinar. And so I was trying not to panic, trying not to freak him out, trying to check on my kids. And then the building, I came back, everything was fine, right? You guys remember, we recovered. And then the building I was in caught on fire, like literally up in flames. Everybody had to evacuate. I ignored the firefighters who were knocking on the door because I thought surely they had the wrong room. So if you've ever had, this is a true story. So I had to get off the phone. Then my husband, who was still on this webinar, was back channeling Janet and Cynthia to be like, she's alive, she's fine, she's walking around the block. So today, I promise we will get to tweens and teens, but this is mom work life. I have notified the boys' teachers. I have notified the school nurse. I have ensured my husband is in the house, not listening in. He will be listening to the recording. And he is available to pick them up if anything is needed. So would you all just collectively Oh, that's hilarious, Cynthia. Like just collectively send a little love and light that we can just spend some good time together. So now that you know why this is an encore performance, let's go ahead and take stock of like our sweet tweens and teens who are also just living, again, like a little bit metaphor for life through this incredible period of disruption and volatility and unpredicted spaces of focus and then crisis and then focus and then crisis. We're going to do this a little bit different. So if you look at, if you can't see this, but we have over 100 social workers or folks connected to the social work school who are on the line. And so we're going to try something. This has worked in other presentations before. In a moment, I'm going to be sharing with you something called Mentimeter. And what you'll see, hopefully, if this works, is, okay, let me look, Janet and Cynthia. Okay, great. So pick up your phone, or if you've got a second monitor, go to www.menti.com. And then if you look up at the top of my screen, Janet and Cynthia, let me make sure you see it. There should be a code there. You just plug that code in with your thumbs or with your keypad. We're going to go through a series of 5 questions to first learn from each other. So I'm going to repeat the instructions and then give you just a moment to practice with this first question. You're going to go to www.menti.com. It works easiest on your smartphone. If you are a Luddite or you don't have your phone near you because you're trying to focus, you can do it on your computer. So Diane, you just go to www.menti.com. On your computer, or you can just watch, and you can put, if you like, just it feels confusing, you can put your answer into the chat too. So the first question that we're going to just take stock of is who is in the room. And so this question of how and where do you engage with teens and tweens, it's a narrative question for you because many of us have different roles. We may be a mom, or a dad or a mentor or both, you know, in our work lives, we maybe work on youth policy, but whatever this question means for you, it will help me to make this a powerful time together to understand what is your work with young people. Now, when I say tweens and teens, I mean onset of adolescence. So like 11 all the way through 26. Okay, so we're starting to get some answers here. So different versions of engagement. So folks are at home with their kids. So we've got parents, school social work programs, engagement as a case manager. You should be able to actually see these on your phone as well. I'm going to be scrolling. Home and work. Home in various locations, school counselor. I'm so grateful to have this blend of folks who engage professionally with young people and parents, because this is just such a human experience. And thank you, those folks who are using the chat. Okay, I see you, Sonia, Deputy Juvenile Officer, and I see you, Diane, church group mentor, retired middle school teacher. Oh, for whoever's Zooming with their grandchild, I hope you get some in-person time soon. Okay, I'm going to do this for about 10 or 15 more seconds, so I'll stop talking and you can just read as well. Thank you, Janet. Okay. So in a moment, I'm going to click over to another question. For those of you who are on your phone, at the top, it'll say that the presenter has gone to a new question, and you can click it over, or it should click you over. For Diane and others who were using the chat box, that worked great. To the extent that you're comfortable, keep using that. One of the things that is important about doing these questions before talking about what the research is showing young people are experiencing right now is to just remember that if we look at just these answers, for instance, our engagement with young people, whether professional or personal, happens in whatever space or place they are. It's not relegated to a particular system or a particular setting. And each of those interactions become really important. So we're going to go ahead and turn over to the next question. This one's a slider. It's a little harder for my chat friends, I think, to answer this one. So I apologize in advance, but you can just feel free to put some anecdotal information if you're using the chat. The tweens and teens in your life, just a litmus test. Now we're strengths-based as social workers. So preview here, we're going to talk about thriving in the next question, but let's anchor in the struggle right now. Where are you seeing tweens and teens struggling? If you have fast fingers and you've ranked this and there's something qualitative that you want to put in the chat, you feel pretty limited by the sliders, feel free to do that. Carol, I see that. Thanks for adding it into the chat. So I asked the same question of a community college last week and a high school 2 weeks ago. And I wish I was tech savvy enough to pull the pictures up, but Teresa, I'll get to your chat here in a second. But it was almost identical. And I would be really curious what it would have been this time last year and sort of periodically. But I think, you know, you're talking about very informal surveying of over 500 people between you all and these other groups. And it's a pretty good affirmation for what intuitively the sense has been, which is the mental and emotional toll of the last 18 months plus being a teen is pretty significant. And what we'll see in a couple of minutes is that young people are designed to be hyper-connected, hyper-social. It is by design, it's by the wiring, which is why it's not surprising that those two would go to the forefront. In terms of existential dread, there is a way on Mentimeter, Teresa, to do like memes. And if we had more time, there would have been a question that included some memes that had existential dread as a part of it. So let's go just a little bit more social worky for a second. So they're struggling socially and emotionally, really in all those areas, but overwhelmingly socially, emotionally, and mentally. And I do appreciate the comment around, you know, it really is dependent for each kid, and that's true. And the moment, the situation, the setting that they're in. Where are you seeing young people thrive right now? Love this. Okay, if I did this right, I think it's going to scroll for me. Yes. Whoever put Roblox, I just let my 10 and 8-year-old get accounts. Can you please tell me how Roblox is enabling them to thrive? It will help my little mommy heart with tech limits. Okay, so if you are done thumbing, you should be able to see a scroll of folks' responses on my screen or wherever you are keeping responses. Yeah, and Tara, in terms of that searching for meaning and purpose, there's we've seen in the research some connection to that related to identity and belonging as well. Ah, Christy, thank you. That's what my boys told me. That was the primary center of their argument for why I needed to stop keeping them off of Roblox. So they thank you. Whoever wrote Finding Voice in the Context of Intersectional Injustice, we're actually going to hit on that today. You know, these young people are in tougher situations, but because of their proximity to the center of those challenges, they're also in a position to potentially be our most powerful generation of activists and change makers. And that gives me a ton of hope. Angie, I see you. The tech struggle is real as a parent. So much resiliency. Okay, we're going to take just about 15 more seconds to look at this one. And as a reminder for anybody who may have joined late, we're just gathering some information as a community and learning from each other. And then we're going to dive into what the research is showing is happening with teens and tweens right now. Okay, next question. So this is an interesting one. It connects directly with the research I'll be providing in a couple minutes. And Chuck, you've got a lot of good like school social workers. Maybe they can give you suggestions for how to get kids to talk instead of grunt. I'm limited in that. But in a couple of minutes, we'll talk about how young people, all of us, are wired by our experiences and the environments that we're in. And so, spoiler, this generation is wired differently than any previous generation because of their life experience. But I'm curious what you're seeing. So in your own life, with the young people that you are engaging with, working for, raising, how are they different from millennials, you know, and then everybody else? How are they different? Just one more little PSA. So if you joined late, when I'm thinking about tweens and teens, it's onset of puberty through adolescence, which actually goes until 26 now. It's a very large, stretchy age span, about 11 to about 26. Okay. I don't know why it's not scrolling more. Hopefully you can see more answers scrolling for you. Let's see. I'm going to see if I can manually do it. Nope. All right, we're going to go to the next question. Try pressing enter. Oh, it's clearly somebody is looking at the bottom here. Let's see. Oh, now for the social workers among us, you just see the justice and justice one in like giant. Okay, we're going to go on to the next question. You can look behind it. Hopefully you can see it on your phone better than what I'm doing. Okay, so this is narrowing our focus. So we see this group that's more anxious, more tolerant and inclusive, more primed for justice and activism, more connected digitally. And then what has happened in this last 18 months to 2 years? When I think about the big sort of waves of things, you've got everything COVID related. You've got all of the racial violence and the racial uprisings. You have all of the economic upheaval. And then, as we know, what that has looked like and translated into in our communities and in our homes and in our families. Come on, Mentimeter, scroll. Thank you, Carol. I'll just look at the chat while it doesn't scroll for us. Janet, are you able to see it on your phone? Can you scroll it yourself? No, it's just stuck. Okay, so here's what I'm going to ask. Janet, are we able to email materials to everybody who's registered here?
We are not able to email the materials, but we can post resources on our webpage and provide a link to the page where they can grab anything that you wanted to share.
Perfect. So especially for those, I'm thinking about the person who's starting a teen program in conflict resolution. At the end of this, it'll actually generate a PDF with all of your responses. And this could be some really great intelligence for those of you who are working with young people. So I'll make sure that Janet gets that and that it posts. Let's see. I think this is our last question for right now. Let me just make sure. Yes, okay. So let me get out of this. At this point, if you get dizzy, I'm going to ask that you avert your eyes. I'm going to get out of Mentimeter and pull up the presentation. If you have any thoughts while you're trying not to look at my screen, feel free to drop them in the chat in terms of things that you were thinking during that time that we weren't able to capture through Mentimeter. And if you give me 4 seconds or so, I'm going to reshare. Okay, nobody's got thoughts. Or if you do, maybe hopefully I'm just moving so quickly through the sharing of screens. Okay, so Janet, looking at you. Can you see it? Okay. I really appreciate everybody weighing in with their perspectives. I think I'll share a little bit about me here in a minute, but I just want to give a global comment in terms of what we're seeing with teens and tweens right now. The world is, life has always been hard. It's always been challenging. The rate, the speed of change, how rapid it is, the acceleration is putting new and different pressure on our young people. And those experiences and environments that are in charge of their wiring are happening more quickly and more intensely than in the past. And so our ability to share with each other, whether it's parent to parent, professional to professional, professional to parent, caretaker, mentor, is imperative because everything is just changing so quickly. So that's something for us to keep in mind. So for the next half hour, nope, less than that. Looking at the time, 20 minutes. we're going to go through some research in terms of what we're seeing with this generation of young people. And I'd love if you used the chat. I won't be able to see all of it, but for each other, to communicate thoughts and reactions, things that maybe you're already seeing evolving and changing as we move forward. The research from this comes out of a book that I wrote. So I'm going to stick it in the chat. And it came out. Wow, I can't do more than one thing at once. Hold on. So you can get this at your bookstore. You can get it on Amazon if, like me, you're trying to break the habit, but you can't. Really anywhere, bookshop.org, Barnes & Noble. But I was an educator and social worker, and I was on the education front lines for a long time as a teacher, ran a school nonprofit, and ultimately closed the high school that I was running in St. Louis. And a driving reason for that was that our mission was to get young people ready for what they needed for life and for college and for work. And we couldn't do that and also meet all of these Missouri public high school requirements. We were serving older youth, 17 to 21, who had a lot on their plates at the time. And for the last 10 years or so, I've been working with national organizations, trying to figure out what actually young people need to be ready and well and to thrive. And in that journey, realized that so many of the conversations about young people and about the places where they spend time, youth development organizations, after school, out of school, camps, schools, homes, they don't have the people who are a part of those environments in the conversations. And so I wrote the book as kind of my love letter back to the front lines of saying, hey, you guys, in the past 10 years, I've been pursuing this question of what young people need to be ready and well. And this is what it says. So today we're really going to drill in and just look at these kids. So here's the thing to just understand. If we as adults in the room are feeling the overwhelm, we've got to understand that this has been a through line in young people's lives, the entirety of their lives. And so I just want to kind of anchor us. Now, I'm not very good at math, so hopefully I've done this right. But for our young adults, so those who are, graduating high school, in college, about to graduate college, they came into the world, if they were born in the States, if they were born anywhere, but they came into the world right after 9/11. And so if you think about that for a moment and think about where we were from a fear and anxiety perspective, from a tightening, from a national security perspective, but also from Maria, I see your chat. It should be available on all library apps. Just reach out to me if you can't find it. But, you think about particular young people during that time. What would it have been like to be a parent who, is Sikh and brings a young boy into the world during that moment in time? A military family, a family on the Northeast. I grew up in New Jersey. Those early years, which the research says are so important, were tough. Now, for those young people, they would go on to start kindergarten when today's middle schoolers were born, right when Wall Street collapsed and the Great Recession kicked in, and also smartphones became a thing, and Twitter and all of these smart technologies. So if you are working with older youth and young adults, understand life started, during this time, which feels super close given everything that's happening in Afghanistan right now. Like we can remember where we were and what was happening. We've had conversations this week in our house about 9/11. And then they're starting school, during this sort of tech revolution and also an economically tight time. That's when our middle schoolers are born. And now our oldest are looking to graduate and go out into the world during a time of, again, economic crisis, real tightness, change, and volatility. It means two things. One thing is that young people today are digital natives for the most part. Either they were, so these are my two biological kids and my two god kids. So my two bio boys are on my left. Harrison and Justice, and this is a picture of them in the middle of homeschool last year, exactly where I'm sitting now at my desk, taking over, doing their work. And I started their digital life before they were born. I announced that I was pregnant with them on Facebook, which I wish I could take back. But their digital footprint starts actually without their permission. And they've never known a world. They're in that middle school and younger from the graphic I just showed you. So they've never known a world without smart technologies. That's the only life that they know. And they're also disruption natives. So my godchildren, Chloe and Brian, they live with us during the summer, and they lived with us when they were little. And all four of these kids, they're now 8, 10, 12, and 14, sort of went through this crazy transition, but at home, right, in the pandemic. And so we saw in real time this summer what it meant that Chloe and Brian in particular, 12 and 14, made the transition into tweendom and teendom while sitting at home. And so in some ways, developmentally, I'd be so curious from other parents and folks working with that 12 to 14, if you've seen this too, they made the developmental leap and they're acting for better and worse, like 12 and 14-year-olds should. But in other ways, they're still super kid-y. They still want to get in bed and cuddle, and I love that. But I also think, oh, what would this have looked like if you were kind of out in the world for the last 18 months? And so the thing, they are clingy, Lisa. Yeah, absolutely. And so the thing just to understand is that, because they are disruption and digital natives, because this has been their experience, it has shaped who they are. So let me just read you really quickly this one small statement from the book. Being digital and disruption natives has evolved young people's basic wiring. As our own lives show, we are shaped by our experiences and environments and genetics, which as a mom, I'm learning more and more. Today's kids are growing up in a rapidly changing world full of historic firsts. As a result, they don't just seem different, they are different. Their childhood experiences and ever-evolving environments are wiring them to learn, work, and operate in new ways. And so in the book, I explore a lot of detail about who these kids are, how they learn, how they develop, what adolescence is, what the world looks like. But for our purposes today, I just want to draw out 3 themes that actually you already did on Mentimeter. The first one, let's start with the middle, is that our kids are stressed and stretched to the max. They're overwhelmed and they're anxious. And so unlike their millennial older brothers or parents or cousins, as the case may be, this group of young people, what the research is showing and what we're seeing in our day-to-day interactions with these kids, they crave safety and security and stability and structure. And I think the thing that breaks my mama heart is that it is the thing that is least promised to them, unless we do it socially and emotionally. And so one thing that I just want you to consider that ties back to those first 5 questions, and then someone was talking about social and emotional development earlier, is that we cannot promise this generation of kids anything remotely close to economic, political, systemic stability, structure, predictability, health, but we can architect and design for that to happen socially and emotionally, which is powerful given that that is the space in which they are struggling right now. All right, TJ, I see you. That was you. All right, perfect. Yes, so social and emotional development for sure. And so what I just need you to hear, and what I have to keep telling myself as a mom, and then also in my work, and I'll throw in my website at the end so you can see what that work is and who I'm working with nationally and locally. It's not going away. It's not always going to be the COVID-19 pandemic, but this level of disruption and volatility, whether it's extreme weather or really nasty, horrible people and conflict, the other things that climate change will do, migration, transition, other health issues, we've got to teach young people to operate in that space. And here's why that is so important. So bump up to the top, younger, longer, with the right opportunities and resources. Now, this is key, right? Opportunities and resources. Today's young people could and should live at least a 100-year life. 100 years for every person, not just that like random aunt that you heard of who lived to be 102 and ate a Twinkie every day. I mean, this is every single person in a time of pandemics and climate change and conflict and violence and struggle and innovation and acceleration and change and unpredictability. And so the question for us as social workers, as humans, as parents, as coaches, as counselors needs to be not how do we get these tweens and teens through school, college ready, career ready, but what does it take? And this is what encore performance right here. This was the theme of our last conversation. What does it take to give these young people a long and livable life? What do they need to know? Who do they need to know? What experiences and resources do they need to have available to them for life to not only be long, but to be livable? And then if you dive deeply into equity issues, what we know is that a livable life is not promised to everyone. And a long life is not promised to everyone, because on one side of Del Mar, for people who are here in St. Louis or in other countries that aren't ours, other cities, Philadelphia, Detroit, Flint, East St. Louis, the actual life expectancy is lower. And so then it's this question of who even gets the promise of a long and livable life. So that is an important context for us. That is a significant change that should reorient our parenting and our professional decisions, the policy and programmatic choices that we're making about what actually is most important. And then for whoever my colleague was that talked about the speaking up about intersectional injustice, that is a strong and powerful piece. So I actually talk in the book about the movement for Black lives, about school shootings, all of these events where young people have organized and rallied and led. And they're proximate to so many of the issues, and they are able, with their understanding of how the technology works and a much better understanding of how the world is working right now, to act. And we need to give them space and move and make sure that they have the platforms to act. So just take a look on the screen right now, and let's just, we were talking about Roblox earlier, like this is our kids' lives. This is a picture of some of the things that are ever present for our tweens and teens. And while many of those things existed while we were younger, not to the degree, the depth, or as visible as they do today. And so one thing that was really important for me in writing this, it went the wrong way. Why is it going this way? There we go. I don't really know why that happened. One of the things that's really important for us to understand is also the role of near peers. For us as adults, it's important, but because the world is changing so quickly and so rapidly, the context, the flavor of these challenges in today's context and what they will likely look like in the future, young people need each other more than they ever have before. So I'm just going to do sort of a whirlwind look very, very quickly at what the research is showing young people are actually experiencing now that will continue and get worse or become inflamed as they move forward. I should just mention at this point, I said about social workers being strengths-based, that I wrote Making It because we often talk about what young people need to survive at a basic level. And then we jump over to thriving and flourishing. So here's the other thing about tweens and teens right now that I really believe strongly. We've got to figure out how they can survive and thrive at once. So as the adults, as the professionals, and as the parents, we have to attend to surviving and thriving and what each of those require at the same time. Now, the other piece of that is understanding that, like, as we work with these young people to construct a fairer and more just world and society, that is not the one we're living in right now. And so the other part of that dual call, not just how do these young people survive and thrive, is that so many young people are held back and harmed by today's systems and structures, right? We know this, especially young people of color, young people who are poor, young people who are living at the margins for other reasons in the foster care system. I know that we've got some folks here from CASA and other places touching the justice system, experiencing youth homelessness. So we've got to teach them to navigate the world as it is, even as we're building this better world, right? Even as we're seeking it. And we've got to be brutally, ruthlessly honest about what that means for each kid, given their circumstances and challenges. So the super brief thing here is the things that are so important that will continue on into their work life and adult life is this tech-touch relationship, man-machine relationship. We see this in how they learn, and we see this in how they work. So here's the glimmer of hope. I spoke with somebody, if anybody follows Cal Newport, he wrote like Deep Work. He just wrote a book saying like no more email. And he's got kids my boys' age. So my boys, again, are 8 and 10. And he actually thinks our kids are going to figure out solutions to like the overloaded email box. But they're going to have to know how to work on technology, with technology, and sometimes for technology. This hyperconnectivity is important from a neurobiological perspective. So when we think about social emotional development and social emotional health, the way that adolescence works, the actual science of adolescence, is that those synapses in the brain, they learn that learning is social and emotional. That the hyper connection, the need for friends and peers, and the incredible intensity of emotions is actually the way that the brain is making connections and learning the world around them. So it's vital for learning and work and performance for those of you in school environments, for social and emotional health to be a priority, not only because it should be a priority, period, but also because it is the enabling conditions for good learning and work and showing up in life. We talked about how adolescence is stretched now all the way to 26, and that'll make sense because of that possibility of a 100-year life. So the way that I think about this now is I think about the first quarter. What do young people need in the first quarter of life? And that pretty much contains childhood and adolescence. The overwhelm translates technically into something called cognitive load. The best way to think about this is if you have an iPhone or Android and it's due for an upgrade and you notice it starts really acting poorly and you're like, man, it's like slowing down, it's closing my apps out. And it's because it really needs to update. And so everything is glitching. And that's kind of the way that young people are living. So for those of you who are in practice, the best way to help when young people are experiencing cognitive load is actually to help with something called executive functioning and teach them what to power down. So like, where's my phone? So, when my phone is slowing down, the first thing that I do is I try to close out as many apps as possible. And it's like a bandwidth issue. And so I would encourage you to think about, how do we reduce bandwidth for kids? And a really important way to do that is learning how to be online or offline at will. And then honestly, I thought it was a little frou-frou in the beginning, and now I'm a complete evangelist for it. Mindfulness works, like mindfulness, stress reduction techniques, anything that's going to reduce the bandwidth. And then we talked about the 80-year work life. But for those of you who are doing college and career counseling, can you imagine a working life that's as long as our literal life right now? How many careers that will include, how many jobs that will include, periods of working and not working, of working more than one job, of working while parenting, of working alone. As we prepare them for the future of work, we need to not just prepare them for jobs and careers, but what that actual 80-year work life could and may include. And I do see, so at this point, this is like a little intermission. Hey, COVID, I'm going to put in my website. I'm very poorly paying attention to the comments right now. And because you all are the Brown School, I'm also going to give you the email that I check the most. Just use it nicely. But that's how you can get in touch with me. And I guess while I'm doing this, so if you're on Twitter, let's see if I can. There you go. That's where I am at Twitter. So for time's sake and to protect for questions, because I do have a couple slides here that are very uber practical. Let's consider the COVID context. I just want to refer back to the Mentimeter. Everything is really jacked up. It's just harder. And so how that's translated, and it's been happening for a while, is that this pathway to success, the American dream, the ladder to opportunity that has forever been inequitable is now just outdated. So understand, it never worked for everyone, but now it works for no one. But our systems still work this way. And this way is saying to kids, you got to graduate high school, go to college. God, let's have this be a 4-year college. What are you going to be when you grow up? What's your major? What's your career going to be? And then just a sequence of promotions or different jobs that hopefully allow you to accrue money, retire with money in the bank, and give back to your kids. It's just not relevant anymore in this life. And so what happens instead is that, and this is for us too, frankly, when kids go out of high school or they enter adulthood, if they don't complete high school, imagine this bazaar, this crazy complicated farmers market with work and learning vendors, and they're hawking their wares. Here's this credential, here's this degree, here's this job opportunity. And historically, and this is why I was so conflicted when I was running a school, we tell kids, especially poor kids, if you just graduate from high school, you'll be okay. Just finish this and you'll be okay. And yet, the thing in our gut knows that's not reality. And so reality is this. Now listen to this. There are over 600,000 post-secondary credentials right now. 600,000 different options that are known and counted. So the education market has blown up, and then work is weird and hard. And the way that we get opportunities has as much to do with what we can do as who we know. And so there are these 4 currencies that our teens and tweens need to focus on getting now, today, even in this super hard, challenging time, right? So if you're afraid that your kid If your kid right now, whoever was saying their kid is having a really tough time, prioritize their mental health. Nothing else matters. Prioritize their social relationships so that they feel stable and steady in the world. Content, knowledge, and completion does not matter as much as these 4 things. They still do have to complete and get that credential, that diploma and degree, because employers want it, colleges expect it. It's important in that way. But the degree or the diploma doesn't always match what young people actually need to know and do. And that's what a lot of you in your jobs, I saw you in the beginning. This is what you do every day. This is going to affirm who you are and what you do. So competencies are the skills and abilities young people need. So the way I think about competencies is the way I think about physical body systems. So my older son has asthma, and I know when his breathing, that makes COVID super scary, by the way, but like when his breathing is impacted, it's going to affect his heart. It's going to affect how he thinks. It's going to affect his skin. It's going to affect his belly, right? Everything. So we have this other systems, and it's our ways of being and doing in the world. It's how we function. How we are thinking is related to how we're feeling, is related to if we're reflecting and processing, is related to if we're healthy. So that's what I mean when I talk about competencies. It's our ability to function and operate in the world. And then connections are our social relationships, both what keeps us socially healthy and wealthy. Social capital is a really important thing, maybe the most valuable currency. How many opportunities have you gotten in your life because of somebody who you knew or somebody who knew of you, right? I had a consultant once who was doing a training, and she said, you get hired based on who you know, and you get promoted based on who knows you. And I thought that was really pretty true. And then cash, good old cash, direct cash. Let's give people the cash that they need, because when you don't have it, life is absolutely very, very hard. So as we're coming to an end here in the next few minutes, I want to just share with you these currencies, building strategies. So what are the things that you can be doing at home and at work? But to protect our time, I'll just ask you to do one of 2 things. One is wait until this PowerPoint is uploaded so you can see the 5, or take a quick picture, because I actually want to get to like these hyper practical things before we end our time together. But just know that, like, in order for us to support a long and livable life, we've got to be expansive. And these are the 5 things the research shows we need to be doing at once, all the time, and to really sort of survey and understand how we're doing in those places. The book, as a little plug for the book, talks extensively. The whole end section is all about this. And where do the things in our system show up? So if I run a social emotional learning program, or conflict resolution, or cultural responsive education, where do they sort into these 5 practices? So this is a little bit of a recap here before we end our time together. And I would say, if you didn't grab my email already, because time probably won't provide for lots of Q&A today, reach out or throw your questions in the chat so we can at least get to 1 or 2. So the review here is, competencies, they used to think that like you either were good at them or bad. You were a creative person or you weren't. But we actually know that these things can be learned and developed and strengthened over time. They can also be depleted. I'm not going to be thinking creatively when I'm really struggling emotionally. Some people, mostly poets, they're very good at that, but I'm not. So I have to attend to my emotional health in order to be able to focus. And we need to be doing that now with tweens and teens actively and deliberately. It's got to be a priority more than, again, content, knowledge, and completion. Those things can wait. How much every kid needs, think about my child with asthma, is going to depend on who they are and the challenges and the context and the circumstances in which they're living their lives. From a connections perspective, There are actually three kinds of relationships: lifelines, like your lifers, the people who've just got your back. Your kids need that. When I say your kids, I mean your actual like babies who live with you, tweens and teens. Sorry, still think of them as babies, or the ones who you're working with or for. So they need those lifers, mentors, people at church, other faith communities, family, friends, but they also need navigators, people who are going to help them understand the world as it evolves. That near peer is really, really critical for that. And then door openers, the people who will sponsor them and say, I trust this kid, give him a chance. Let me introduce him to this part of the world. Competencies and connections are the most important to build. Credentials and cash are the things they need to have. So with credentials, if they're going to have an 80-year career, my wisdom for any of you talking about college right now is you've got to match it to the realities of their lives and just shrink the time horizon. What is needed in the next 3 to 5 years? God willing, it'll be a long life and they can always come back. But what makes the most sense now with an eye toward later, but right now? And then on the cash side, here's my provocative point as we end. Given everything that's happening right now, there are the issues of deep poverty. Separate from that, cash scarcity can happen at any income level, right? Cash crisis, financial crisis at any income level. Every child, every young person should be prepared for what do they do if things get tough financially, and how do they keep showing up, and who do they go to? And then when they get out of it, how do they continue on as well? So those are some tips and tricks. I'd love to come back for a third encore because, oh my God, no emergency has happened. We have a full 2 minutes. So if you want to use the chat, I'm looking at it right now. And I'm also looking at Janet and Cynthia. So, feel free to this is the book. If you didn't pick up on that, this is the book. This is what it looks like. Let me see. I think the other slide. Okay, there you go. That's how you can get in touch with me. And if you scroll up in the chat, you can get the secret email that I check more often. Janet and Cynthia, in our very full minute and a half, any questions that you saw or things to wrap us?
So being aware of the time and wanting to be respectful of yours and theirs, I would just like to make sure we understand what we're going to be posting. I've shared it a couple times in the chat that there's a resources tab on the Open Classroom webpage where you go to register. There's upcoming programs, past programs, and resources. And that's just a kind of a free-for-all organized by date, but we can post anything that you want. So Stephanie, what will be there for this group that they can expect to come, say, tomorrow and grab?
Yeah, so I would say take a quick picture of this slide if you want to check out me, get in touch, or, let me go back to you can see me and Harrison with the book here. I'd love for you to pick up a copy of the book because I wrote it for you. And man, it'd really be a shame if it didn't get into folks' hands. On the resources page, you're going to have this PowerPoint, and then I'm going to download the Mentimeter results. So for any of you who need that intelligence for your work or you're just curious, it'll actually be a PDF that you'll be able to click through and see people's responses.
Perfect. And so, we do have some members of the audience that have specific and detailed questions regarding research, and we're just encouraging that they should reach out to you by email and that you would love to engage with them.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is my husband and I met at Brown. We have little baby bears. This is a community that means a heck of a lot to us. I would love to be in touch. As you'll see from my last chat, one of my friends and someone I went to school with is in here from a different country, and hopefully moving back here is our network, and you are encouraged 100% to be in touch. I'd love to connect with you.
Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for coming back, for braving it, because I know you said you were nervous what could possibly happen the second time. clearly such strong interest in the topic, and there's so much that we could have continued to engage this audience with. So as your work continues, please do come back to us to share. And unfortunately, these challenges are not going to be resolved super quick for parents, for social workers in the field. The challenges facing our young people and how to support them are thorny problems that we're going to be working on for a while. So thank you for helping to guide some insights in that space and for being our guest today.
Absolutely. And the last thing I'll say for folks who are still on the line, if you think that something like this would be helpful where you work, we can talk and connect about a talk. I see a lot of people saying like, this has been validating. This is what I've been needing to hear. This is research from the field. So please do reach out. And brevity obviously is not my strength. So if your question was unanswered, it's on me. Please email and ask me your question.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. We are at time. Thank you to a wonderfully participatory audience. Cynthia, thank you for having my back and making sure all the technology was working well. And we will hope to see you all sometime very soon at another open classroom. Please stay healthy and safe out there. And thank you for all the good work you're doing on behalf of our young people. It takes a village for sure. And I know this is a wonderful village, and I'm so honored to be a part of it. So have a good day, everybody. Goodbye. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.